Morning, everyone. Let me turn my phone off and
Morning.
turn the heater off.
Before we get going, may I make a request?
Yeah, sure.
Would it be possible to take the link from the email and put it embedded in like the Moodle? So each time we just click and go, because it's buried in a lot of emails in my folder. It'd just be easier if it was on the Moodle thing, if you could
Let
do
me see if I
that.
can do that. I don't even know if I can do that or
I know you can do it. I don't know how though. Other teachers have done it.
not. Okay.
It just if it's not changing, it's just easier to click it each time for Moodle.
I don't think it's changing. Let's see here. That's a good thing. I didn't even think about it.
Well, normally it wouldn't be a problem, but all those intros is in a folder, so there's like 2 dozen emails I got to scroll through just to get to yours.
Okay. All right. So there it is. First thing on the agenda in Moodle.
Thank you. That's a big
Hopefully
help.
that works. So I'm going to give this same poll that I gave last time, even though, or the last class I had, even though I lost it, I got to redo the poll. Um, so just answer that. Something got the dogs all riled up. I don't know what it is. Squirrel. Okay, so today, so anyway, there's the Zoom recordings from the past 2 days, and I'm trying to put on there what we're doing and what we're talking about and so forth. So today we are going to get into. Oh, and by the way, I have added if you've submitted the lifespan of a particular material and so forth. I've got those up if everybody would like to look at those. Some of these are absolutely fantastic. Daniel done a really good job on his. His is probably the longest one with lots of numbers and mind-blowing data. So very good on Daniel's.
That'd have been the best thing for a 15-minute presentation, but
Alex did really good on hers. I can't remember which one she done. And Ben Stark also did a very good one on life and times of fiberglass insulation. I know not all of these are PowerPoints, and that's fine. I didn't want to bog you guys down with getting specifics on this. Just get as much information as you can. You did really good on that. So some of these are just papers. Some of them are Excels. Some of them are PowerPoints. And so very good job on that. If you haven't done it already, I know it's late. You get whooped for that. So we'll take you out behind the barn and give you a whooping. So get on it, get done, get it submitted. And so anyway, so it looks like we're going to continue doing Zoom classes. 77% want Zoom classes. Of course, they will all be recorded, and that is fine.
I don't know why mine is on there twice. I only submitted mine once, but it's
Oh
showing.
my God, voter fraud. Oh. So today we're going to get into the building envelope. And if these dogs keep going, I'm going to holler out the door and tell them to shut up. They're driving me nuts. And so I've got a couple of things here that are probably good value to you, and I'm going to put some more stuff up there. So I've actually got this book up in the links as well. This is a very good book on that I've used several years. It was put out by well, can't think of them. South Face Energy Institute out of Atlanta. Really good stuff. So this is actually the book for building science. If some of you have already had building science, and I know some of you probably going to hear this again, but remember that I have to teach this class as if nobody has ever taken any of this. This is an introduction type class. So sorry, Alex, I know you're going to have to hear this stuff again. Anyway, so this is a very good book if you want to read through it, because some of the things that I'm going to be going through today are going to be out of this book, and some are going to be some of these other sites. I've got identifying seal, air sealing, house wrap versus vapor barrier, radiant barriers, R value table. The R value table is used quite extensively in building construction when you're thinking about insulation. So one of the things that we call this is an aligned building envelope. And what that does is it deals with air barriers and moisture barriers and insulation barriers. So let's kind of look at what's going on there, what I'm talking about there. Let's see, which is probably the best one to start with. So anyway, I want to, in today's anyway, I'm going to start going through these, and I'm going to work from the bottom up. So today we're going to get into insulation barriers. It is probably one of the most convoluted, I guess you could say, basically because, we're having to count up stuff. And by when I say count up stuff, if I can move some of this stuff around, let me just hide that. If anybody puts anything up on the chat room, please holler at me to look at it, because I'm going to hide this this panel so that I can see everything I need to see, because this panel really gets in my way here. So this is kind of the calculator that we use for calculating R values in a house. And before we get too much further, let's talk about what an R value is and what a U factor is and all that good stuff. So, and please holler at me if I've went through this stuff before. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I just want you guys to understand what this all is. So we have, let's start off with the U factor, and the U factor is the speed, and the speed of heat. Remember the other day we talked about the different types of heat transfers, and I'll go back over there. We've got radiation, we have convection, we have conduction. I guess I need to put the shun on there, don't I? Okay, so this is direct. The convection is air, water, gas, and conduction are solids. So we have heat movement through these different types of movements there. And so a U factor is the speed of the heat. So let's say that we have a piece of glass here. And this piece of glass is in its form, you know, a solid piece of glass. We'll say that it's a 1/4 inch thick. And in this case, it is a conductor. Now, what does a conductor mean? You have a conductor, and this is not a train conductor, and you have an insulator. So a conductor, you know, it allows heat to move through it very quickly. Okay, so it's going to have a very high U factor, or we'll just say a very high U. And then an insulator has a very low U. So in this piece of glass, when we have a heat source over here, by the way, that's fire. And so just, you know, we'll put it in as red. So, okay, we got fire over here. And, you know, this is going to heat up this piece of glass, and she's going to move through here pretty daggum quickly, so that if we decide to touch this, this is going to give off heat on this side. Now let's take the same stuff that we have here, glass, and now we're going to, let's see if I have a pink one. Do I have a pink one? Pink, 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 kind of, sort of, maybe not really. I'll go with purple. Magenta. Okay, so now we're going to take glass and we're going to fiberize it. All right, we're going to have all these little fibers of glass. It's still glass, all right? But we're going to fiberize it like wool or something. So what we're doing in here is we're creating gaps in here to where there's some air in here that does not move, and all of these little joints and places here. And this air does not transfer very quickly unless we got a lot of wind coming through here. Then this is not going, you know, it's going to stop that pretty much. Okay, so we're going to have our fire over here again, and this time it's going to take its little old sweet time trying to get through here, because there's a bunch of spaces in here and so forth. So, you know, when it gets over here to the end, it might have released some of that heat into the insulation, and we have stopped, you know, pretty much barricaded that heat so that it doesn't transfer through. So insulator, conductor. All right, so the very same material, glass, and we use it in a solid or in a fiber form, and then we can get either a high U factor or a low U factor in that. Now, when we're talking about the U factor, then we have to talk about an R value. So let's say that we have a flame over here. Let's go back and put it in red. Got a flame over here, and for, you know, the U factor, you know, it's trying its best to do as fast as we can, and we need to basically set up a roadblock here so that we do not allow this heat to transfer around this roadblock. And so, you know, we've got the lights on there that's going to be flashing, and, you know, do not enter. All right. So you know, it's not going to get through here. And you know, the bigger this barrier, the more it's going to stop our heat flow. So we refer to that as the R value, and they work relatively in perspective with each other. The higher the R value, the lower the U factor. So the U factor is equal to 1/R, and the R is equal to 1 over U. So let's say, for instance, that I buy a window, and most windows and doors are sold with a U factor, and it has a U that equals, we'll say 0.33. All right, so to find out what our R value, to change this over, then all we have to do is say 1 over 0.33, and that is going to equal 1 divided by 0.33 equals 3.03. All right, so this is now the R value for that window, 3.03. That means it has 3.03 units of resistance in it, you know, compared to the 0.33 mile per hour heat flow that we've got going here. Now, when we're thinking about insulation in our house, there's a couple of things that we have to keep in mind, and that is the code. The code says, you know, again, the code is the lowest piece of junk that you can build by law. It is the lowest passing grade. So when we're thinking about a code, when we're talking about a wall, we're talking about 13 plus 2, and I'll explain that in a minute. In the floor, we have to have a 19, and these are R values, by the way. And then in the ceiling or roof, we have to have an R30 or a R38, and I'll talk about that as well. So, you know, what does that compile to as far as a U value? And hold on just a minute, guys. Hang on. Hush! Keys!
I got a vacuum cleaner, they did good.
Yeah.
But they seem.
Well, you just need to turn the vacuum cleaner on, scare the crap out of them all the time.
But I ain't got it with me. I need to start running it.
Did she get you your money?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, the housekeeper showed up. That's why my dogs were driving me nuts. So let me think about where I was at. Let's talk about the wall. No, we're going to figure out what the U value is. So again, you know, the U is equal to 1 over the R. So let's go with the floor. So an R19 is equal to what U? So we're going to take 1 divided by 19, and that gives us a 0.052632. 0.052632. Notice that this is very much lower than that window that we had. The window was equal to 0.33 U or a 3.03 R. So here we're talking about a bigger number, and we end up with a lower U. So that means, you know, we're in the city limits now. We're going to have to go slower here than we were driving out here on the interstate. So an R19 gives us more resistance. Okay, think of it as driving in deep sand or something, where the U factor is going to be very slow. So what about an R38? So an R38 is going to be equal to 1 divided by, and we're going to end up with an even smaller number, 0.026316. 0.02, then forgot the dang number, 6316. There we go. So this is even a smaller number because we have more resistance. So now we're driving in 4 feet of wet concrete. We're just not going to get anywhere, or mud or whatever. So now we have very slow speed because we have more resistance here. All right, so let's go back and talk about the wall. The wall in codes is 13 plus 2. They put it this way because they want you to, let me see if I can do this a little bit better. Use a ruler to make a pretty wall. So here's my wall, got my 2x4s in here, and we're looking down on the wall. And so, you know, the heat flow in here is, you know, we're trying to slow this heat down as best that we can with as many materials as we can. So when the code says that we need to have an R13, that R13 is going to be that batt insulation or whatever insulation that we put on the inside of the wall there. All right, so the R2, where is that? So the R2, and I'm going to put it in as blue because we generally think of blue board as an insulation. So what they're trying to do there, and by the way, this is the outside and that's the inside. We want to put this blue board out there as a thermal skin. And so that way we don't have any gaps anywhere. And this is the number one thing when we're talking about the thermal barrier. So the thermal barrier is going to stop a lot of stuff, or at least slow it down. And then this here is going to take care of the rest. So let's put this in perspective. We got a semi truck coming down the road, and this semi truck is very heavy, very big, and we need to slow this bugger down. And so here's this truck. He's speeding down the highway, and he's going to hit a VW bug there. And so it's not going to stop him, but it's going to slow him down a little bit. So this is that R2. All right, that's this here. And then after that, once it slows it down a little bit, we're going to have this concrete barrier up here, and that's going to be the R13, and it's going to slow him down completely. So if basically this transfer truck speeding along through here and hits this barrier, then, you know, he could bust through it, but we need to slow him down a little bit before we hit that barrier. I know this is a stupid analogy, but, you know, we try to slow him down a little bit, and that's where we get that batt insulation in there. I know I've got a warped mind sometimes. So now let's talk about the floor. So that's pretty dry and simple. We've got our floor here. We're going to put an R19 insulation in there and be done with it, right? Simple and easy. Going to come back and talk about that. A lot of times when we put an R19 in there, we may not get an R19 out of it. Now let's talk about this ceiling. This ceiling that's a big difference here from an R30 to an R38. So let's look at our ceiling here. So we're going to build a conventional stick-built frame ceiling, and we've got our wall here, double top plate, and we've got our ceiling joists and our rafters. So basically there is the magic line right there. Now let's say that these are 2x6s, 2x6s, and this is a 2x6. So that means at this point right here, we're lucky if we can get 5 1/4 inches right there. All right, we're real lucky if we can get 5 1/4 inches. However, when we're doing that, we've got our drywall on here. When we're doing our insulation may be 15, maybe 10, maybe 8, I don't know. It's just, you know, depending on what we're using, then we have to have a thickness here. And let's say, for instance, for batt insulation, I'm just guessing here, I need 15 inches of insulation. And that insulation, remember that it needs to go all the way to the outside. But if you'll notice right here, it's being cut off. We can't go there. It's just not going to work. And then, so that means that we have to go with an R38 to get the, you know, to get the maximum percentage of higher R value through the majority of the house. Now let's take this house and do a little differently. So in this case, we're going to have our wall here, and we're going to use what is known as a raised heel truss. Now, what is a raised heel? This is the heel of the truss. This portion right there is the heel. And so when we're talking about a raised heel truss, we're basically taking the top cord of the truss and we're pushing it upward so that we can try our best to maintain our insulation through here. All right. Depending on what size this is, we can order these heels in different heights. So in this case, we can maintain 15 inches all the way to that magic line, which is the outside of the stud there, outside face of stud. And we only have to go with an R30 at this point. All right. So it's either or. If you have this and you cannot provide an R30 through all this way, all the way to the outside here, then we have to go with an R38. If we can provide an R30 all the way to the outside wall, then we can go with R30. So any questions on that so far?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the relationship in inches relative to the 30 and 38? I mean, you picked a random 15, but is there a formula to use in the field?
Most materials, it's about R2 per inch for our fibrous blown in and fiberglass.
Right there's where you want to go, to that R value table, and depending on what you're using will tell you what what you're going to get. So if you're looking for an R30, you can use 8 inches of high density batt or 9.5 inches of just regular fiberglass. If we're using rock wool, then this is per inch. And I don't know why they have such a variant on here. I guess it's a shitty job versus a very good job. So the roundabout with that would be a 3.6. So an R 3.6. So let's say R30 divided by 3.6 equals 8.33 inches, or 8 5/16 of an inch of rock wool on there. Cellulose, blown cellulose in an attic is we use 3.65 as the average. So R30 divided by 3.65, and that way we have to have 8.22 inches of the blown in insulation, or 8.25 inches of that. So it all really depends. Now let's go down here to polyisocyanurate. Forget this number here, it's wrong. I don't know where they come up with that, but they screwed up, because if you come down here to full face polyisocyanurate, 1 inch gives you an R 7.5. That's about the best type of insulation that you can get, is polyisocyanurate. Now you can't blow this in, but you can buy it in. It's a rigid insulation. You can buy it and cut it and put it in. That becomes a big pain. But let's just say if we used it, 30 divided by 7.2 is only 4 inches. So really, we only need about we can buy a 4 inch and a 1 inch, or excuse me, you can buy it in 2, 1.5, 1.5, 2, 3. I don't know that you can buy it any thicker than that. So, we could use a 3 and a 1 inch and get very close to that. And, but it's going to be a pain putting it in. So, just remember that rigid insulations, putting it between joists and studs, can be a real big pain in the butt. But then you have the foam, blowed foam insulation, polyurethane, which is 6.25 per inch. So if we spray it in, then we only need 4.8 inches, or almost 5 inches of spray foam in the insulation. Now, the one good thing about the spray foam is that it gives us 100% air tightness, 100% coverage. There's no gaps. It's probably, the best all around to use, but it is extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea of vermiculite here, what the hell is vermiculite? And vermiculite is a mineral that you see a lot in potting soils. Vermiculite and perlite both come in potting soils. Vermiculite looks kind of like cork in potting soil, and then you get those really white, looks like styrofoam balls that's in potting soil. That is perlite. So at 3 point, we would never use vermiculite in an attic form. It's usually used in a block, but just saying if you would need 14 inches there to 14 and a 16th worth inches of vermiculite. That would be just stupid using this, because this stuff gets everywhere. It's just really fine stuff, and it would go through every crack that you got and just make a huge mess. But that gives you an idea on that. Now, with this R value table, it gives you not only R values of just insulation, but it gives you R values of all of our construction materials and so forth like that. So let me go ahead and just kind of introduce you to some of these different types of insulations right quick. I swear I'm gonna skin me some dogs. Okay, so bad insulation, that's the itchy stuff that everybody hates to mess with, including myself. It is not carcinogenic, but I would not want to breathe it in, because these little glass fibers are going to tear your lungs all to pieces. So I love how they put some of these pictures up here. This is not the way to do this. This is wrong, super wrong. Let me see if I can find a better picture. This again, this is the wrong way to do that. You see these little ears on here? Those little ears are meant to go on the face of the stud. That's not even good. There we go. That's better. All right. So you see they've pulled those little ears out through there, and they stapled it directly on the stud. This gets a great big cha-ching. This is the proper way of installing your bat insulation. Notice how nicely tucked around the light fixture, or the electric fixture here is, versus that other one that we were looking at up here. This is wrong because they've stapled it to the sides of the stud, not the face of the stud. Now, what difference does that make? Somebody sent me a chat, that looks like a good wall. Yes, that is a good looking wall, Mark. Let me go back down here and yeah, I forgot about Mark's been through this too. There may be some others that's already been through the building science. And again, I apologize. I have to go through it for people like Mark, who's never been through that class before. I got to pick on you in a minute, Mark, sorry. So I'm looking down on my wall, and I've got my crooked studs that I brought from Crooked Trees from Lowe's. And if I take that ear there and put it to the side when I put my drywall on, then I have these gaps in here that are not good. All right, this is not good. These are called gaps. All right, remember that, when we're talking about that bad insulation, we're talking about the number of inches. So if we're trying to get an R13 here, that R13 is a full 3.5 inches here of insulation. So when we're pulling this in here and making this gap here, we might be down to 2.5 inches here. All right. So we're not going to have an R13 right through this point and right through this point. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we pull those ears all the way out and place them on the face of the studs. That way it stretches our insulation out and we get a full 3.5 inches all the way across to the other side, and there's no gaps whatsoever.
Question.
What's that?
Question. Not all studs are 16 on center, because sometimes you have wider or narrower. So how do you address that situation?
They make different insulations for different sizes. Typically 16-inch and 24-inch on center studs are normal. Some insulations, they are sold, let me see if I can find a picture of that right quick.
No, those are still standard dimensions. I'm talking about your old house oddball crap that
Cut it to size.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're relying on the installer to make the cuts properly.
yeah, but if it's greater and you're still short, I mean, you can't stretch it. So how in the hell you attach it properly?
Well, you cut off 2 inches of another roll and stuff it in there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get. Is it more important to have the tab on either side correct and maybe stick it in the middle somehow, or what?
No, the tab is just there to kind of help you, but you can use tape, or there's tons of things that you can do on there to
And
to
you
make
can
it-
cut it away and leave a little strip of paper to overlap if you need to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can just rip it off of the paper.
I was going to try to show you John Manson. Their insulations, every fourth one has preformed cuts in it. Let's see if I was trying to find a picture of that, but of course it's not going to show me. So let me just go back and draw it. Like I say, John Mansfield is about the only insulation person that I know. So let's say that you've got a roll of insulation here and you roll it out. Every fourth piece of insulation in a roll has different size perforations already cut through this. So it's very easy to tear this by hand. And, you know, and if we've got some oddity here where we've put in, you know, we've used a 24-inch roll here and it only got us to there, then we can, you know, we can cut this and fill up that gap in here. Remember that you don't want to compress your insulation. Fluff is the stuff. All right. When it comes to insulation, fluff is the stuff. So if, for instance, you know, if it would be better to trim this up, and it's easy, very easy to trim this up. Let's say that we had 6 inches here, and here over here, we've got an 8-inch piece. If we shove that whole 8-inch piece in here, then we're taking, goes back to that little picture that I was telling you about a minute ago, where we took all that fibrous insulation and then we had that piece of glass over here. If we shove all this together, that's what we're making. We're going from an insulator to a conductor. So we need to take out our knife, take out an 8-foot long 2x member and shave a little bit, shave 2 inches off of this to get to a perfect 6-inch so that we can put it in there. And yeah, that's perfectly fine. Even though we might have a gap in paper here, that paper is not always put into a house. So you can get this insulation crafted which means that it has paper on it. Okay, so this is crafted. You can buy it with just plain old paper. You can buy it with a radiant barrier on there, or you can get it uncrafted. So what does the crafted do? It actually, so uncrafted is just basically that. It doesn't have any paper on it at all. And so this is, or unfaced, faced versus unfaced. So, you know, what's the difference? The faced just gives you an extra little moisture barrier. Okay, so this is considered a moisture barrier. Now, what if, I don't want to get a little bit ahead on time, but so yeah, let's say, actually, let's go back to the uncrafted with, this has been a long drawn out debate as to whether we cover with plastic or not cover with plastic to make a vapor barrier. Okay, so this is wrong. I don't care what you say, this is wrong. You basically, what you're doing is you're putting up a double vapor barrier there, and that is wrong. If you use crafted paper on this, you know, they tell you to come through and cut various slits with a knife through here. But the best thing that you need to do is use uncrafted insulation and then put the plastic on there. Again, the use of plastic on an interior wall is highly controversial. They've been arguing about this for years and years. And it seems like about every month, well, there's a new report to come out that says using plastic's great. And then there's another report comes out 2 weeks later. It says, nope, forget what we said. We were wrong. And they, you know, it's just a constant battle. So
it's climate specific, right? It depends on where your vapor drive is. If you're in the north and all your vapor drive is from the inside out, then a vapor barrier makes sense. But here in a mixed humid climate, we have vapor drive from both directions. If you put in a moisture barrier, it's going to trap water in your building assembly.
that's right. So the saying is your vapor barrier goes on the side of the heat in the wintertime. So up north, obviously the heat's going to be inside the building. Down in Florida, the heat's going to be outside all year round. And so, you know, again, with here where we have both types of climates, something like this may or may not be good for us depending on who you talk to. I don't know, the science, like I say, for some reason is very debatable on this. And have I ever seen problems with this? No. And yes. What I have seen is in bathrooms where, and really only bathrooms. So, you know, let's say that we've got this wall and we've got a plastic barrier through here. And then we decide to put over top of this vinyl wallpaper. So this vinyl wallpaper has a low permeability, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So this has super low permeability. Anything less than 1, that's greater than. Less than 1 is, you know, a moisture barrier. Both of these have that. So in a bathroom where you've got you know, a shower head just going all the time with hot steam coming out of it, it gets caught in between here. And I took the vinyl wallpaper down in this bathroom, and when I did, I mean, it was hairy. There was mold you would not believe behind this, where it had been trapped in here. So I'll get into more of this. What is today? Today is Wednesday. Monday. I'll get into more of this on Monday when we talk about moisture barriers. But so how does this moisture get in there? And it's basically due to what we call dew point. And like I say, I'll explain that a little bit more on Monday. I don't want to get that. I want to stay on insulation as much as I can. But remind me, if I don't talk about the dew point, which I probably will, to come back and talk about that. So that's bad insulation. So let's look at rock wool. Rock wool is almost very much like the bad insulation. It has, you know, it's made of a different type of material, and it still kind of uses the same principle of using air spaces in there for your insulation properties. So let's go to cellulose. And I've always found out that you better put insulation in there. Otherwise you're going to end up with a whole bunch of pictures of fat people. Cellulose insulation, blown cellulose insulation. It can be blown in dry or it can be blown in wet. So, you know, it's basically what I call wrap bedding. It's paper, all right, that's been treated with a fire retardant, and you can blow it in and here's a good, very good point that I want to make. If you look up in your attic and you can see your joists, you do not have enough insulation, because this is nothing more than a thermal bridge, and it sucks. So there's another good name. What is a thermal bridge? A thermal bridge is just like what, you know, we're thinking about. If we're on a drive, we're going to California, and we come up to the Golden Gate Bridge. Why am I not drawing? There. So we're going to go up to the Golden Gate Bridge here, and we're going to try to get across this big bridge here because there's water down here. All right. This bridge helps us get across through there. So let's look at a concrete block. A concrete block looks something similar to this. And remember that vermiculite that I was talking about? That vermiculite, people pour this vermiculite down in the cores of the concrete to add insulation to this. But unfortunately, due to conduction, this is useless. This does nothing, absolutely nothing, because the heat movement through here is going to come up and hit that block, and the first thing it's going to do is go right around it. And this is called bridging or bypassing. So this is a thermal bridge. When we are talking about that ceiling, we've got our drywall here. We've got our ceiling joists in here, and we only fill up to here with our insulation. Then pretty much the same thing when our heat hits this thing, it's going to redirect and go right through our joists there. And that goes back to some of those thermal imaging pictures I believe I showed you. Where you can see the studs. Of course, they're going to be shooting people. Okay, so there's a wall, and you can see every stud in there. And that's the bridging. That's allowing that heat to bypass the insulation there. So when we're talking about putting that insulation in our attic, which, you know, I told you that heat does not rise, it's being pushed up. But let's think about being pushed up. Let's think about let's talk about slime for a minute. We pick up some slime in our hand and we just crush it in our hand. What's going to happen? It's going to squeeze out through our fingers. So that's the same thing that's happening here. So when that heat is being pushed up, it's going to squeeze out through our weak points here. So whenever you do any type of insulating at all, there it should look like that. You should not be able, well, you shouldn't even be able to see this. The reason that's there is it's a very crappy way of making a walkway. The code says you have to have a walkway in your attic to be able to get to your HVAC systems if you have it in the attic. And so instead of raising it up, raising a platform up above the insulation, they've cut a hole. So that's kind of like you're trying to fill up your bathtub with water and you haven't put the plunger in. So, you know, it works just the opposite. Heat gets pushed upward like water gets pulled downward. And if you don't have it completely, totally cut off, then it's just going to find a way through there. So that is, in a nutshell, cellulose insulation. This is my favorite type of insulation. This is the insulation that I've used in my tiny house, that I've used in my bus. By the way, guys, I won a bus yesterday, and I'm going to go down to Lexington, South Carolina to pick it up tomorrow. And so I'm going to be, oh, by the way, if anybody's got my ARC 112 class tomorrow, I will be doing a recorded video for tomorrow's session. So make sure you text me if you have any questions on any of that stuff. So this is put into a wall. This is sprayed in kind of wet. And then once it's wet, you let it dry off and you can go back and cut it off, and it works really well because it again, just like the foam, it adheres to every space, and you don't have gaps in there. So you can have some gaps. This was not done very well. Hopefully they go back and they fix these places. So in bad insulation, you're going to end up with more gaps because it's hard to really fill that space in without compressing it in. So moving on up the line here, let's talk about ESP, which is expanded polystyrene. That is not. Let me just do expanded polystyrene. So this is your coffee cup, basically. There you go. Perfect example of this is ESP, expanded polystyrene. And so you start off with these raw beads and you heat it or whatever, and then it expands. So if you put it into a mold, then when they expand, they will glue themselves to each other. And, you can make all sorts of things. You can use the packing materials that we see for different materials that's being shipped. We can put it between different types of material here to create a board. All of a sudden lost it. SIP panels, what I'm trying to think of. So you can, and even they've got into they mix it with concrete, and they're making foam blocks with mixtures of concrete and expanded foam. It's pretty cool. It does melt, very quickly. And then of course, you've obviously seen it in the styrofoam airplanes that we played with. You see it in coffee cups and just a whole bunch of different other things. Big time no. It just bothers me. I like eating at cookout, but unfortunately cookout serves everything in these great big foam things, and I'm not a big fan of that because it just goes and gets wasted in the landfill. Now let's talk about EXP, extruded. EXP, extruded polystyrene. So what does extruded mean? So extruded is like playing with Play-Doh. So when we were playing with Play-Doh, we're growing up, and not videos, images, and we were playing with, I don't see it. Remember the playing with the extruder? Man, that's a kind of an odd toy to be having for kids. So this is an extruder. So basically we're shoving Play-Doh in here, and we can come out with different shapes. So that's an extruder. Basically we have, we're heating this up and we're pushing it through a form to end up with different size pieces there. I'm trying to think, do they even use this in the food industry? I'm not 100% sure. I do not think so. This is a little bit more expensive, and it again will melt if burnt, and it gives off high toxins, but this is a better insulation than the expanded. This gives you an R5 per inch, where the expanded gives you an R4 per inch. Let's go to the polyiso cyan. I didn't spell it right. Polyisocyanurate. So, you know, when you pull this up, sometimes they'll give you the wrong stuff, obviously right there. Well, so this is a mixture of a foam and fiberglass. So this has fiberglass in it. So if you ever use this stuff, and it generally comes with a reflective coating on it, which is a good thing. I think all insulations ought to come with a reflective coating on it. The polyisocyanurate, or otherwise known as isoboard, is a yellowish looking foam, and this will give you an R 7.2 per inch, which is the best insulation that we can get. Again, it's a rigid form, meaning that it comes in a, you know, in a board form. You can buy it 4x8 sheets, and I think you can buy it in 4x12 too. Not right, I'm 100% sure on that, but it is a very good insulation, especially if it has that reflective coating on it. So let's see, is there any others? Yeah, spray foam. Isonine. I'm gonna spell that.
ICYNE.
There you go. Isonine spray foam. So this is isonine spray foam. Isonine is a closed foam. You can also get an open foam.
Isonine is an open foam.
I'm sure about that.
Isonine's open cell.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. You're probably right. It's been a while since I've talked about this, but so an open foam versus a closed cell foam, like great stuff. The old-fashioned great stuff is a closed cell foam, and you put it between windows, and it'll ruin your windows. And when it expands, it has a lot of push on it. Open cell, when it expands, it does not have that force that messes up your windows and stuff. So yeah, you're probably right. Isonate is an open cell foam. So we spray that in there, and it, like I say, it covers everything. It gives us also a good it gives us a good air barrier in here, so we don't have any movement of air in and out. Now, there's other types of things that we have to go into to make sure that we don't kill ourselves with our own carbon monoxide and stuff. But the isonine is all around the best type of insulation to use, because we have the air sealing as well. It doesn't have as high of rating as the expanded polystyrene or the extruded polystyrene or the iso board, but because we get air sealing in here, it also gives us a very good air barrier in there. So that's why we need to use that. Again,
because it's open cell, it allows vapor transfusion where the others don't. EPS and expanded don't allow moisture to move through them, where open cell does.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So if we use an open cell, then we're basically creating a big old vapor barrier, which is not too good. And then if we're using this, then we're getting an air barrier. That's the only thing we're trying to do is get an extra air barrier out of it, which
both open and closed create a good air barrier. It's just that closed doesn't allow the vapor movement and open does.
Right. So, we put up a house wrap, and a lot of people think that that's an air barrier, but it's not. It is a breathable, it is a bulk moisture barrier. So when we put up the tight, oh my God, what I'm trying to think of. Tyvek, yeah, it's still not 100% vapor barrier. It's just it's a vapor barrier. It's not vapor proof. That's what I'm trying to think of. Anyway, I'll get onto that next week. I'm getting confused. I'm confusing myself now. What I wanted to say here was, again, especially in your attic, try to make sure that you're covering, and I mean, just a little bit a little bit is better than nothing. So this was, they did a great job, but they have a lot of bypasses through here that are going to allow the heat to bridge across. So just a little bit, I'm talking just a little bit, sprayed across the top of this is going to help that. Now, in this particular case, they're probably going to cut this off and put drywall up here. But, think about it. If you went the extra step and you put that rigid insulation on the outside before you put your roofing on, or you go on the inside and put a blue board rigid insulation here before you put your drywall on, then it could help out very good there. Bladder break. Okay, yeah, take about 10 minutes of bladder break, and we'll come back at 10:42. Okay, so we'll get started back talking about different insulations and so forth. Bad insulation, I think foam. What else? I think, let me go back and look at this. I think we pretty much talked about that. Now, I want to go into a little bit more on the insulation side of it. As far as, I want to show you some pictures of insulation problems that arises. It's more of a air sealing problem than an insulation. Now here, so this is an attic where there is a pipe chase going down through there. And, there should have been a piece of blue board or something put across this and sealed around all of these pipes so that we can put our insulation across through here. This is an attic. So basically, out above this, it's going to get very cold. And, like now it's 44 degrees here in Morganton. So it's going to be 44 degrees down inside of this chase here where the cold air is going to sink. And there's no insulation at all through here. So we needed to do one of two things. One, we can go in here and create an exterior wall down around this chase here and insulate the walls, or very simply, we can just go across the top of this thing with some blue board or something and put some insulation on the top of it. Again, between walls, this is again, looking in the attic, we have a HVAC chase where we have just tons of insulation just falling down through there. And this is actually loose fiberglass insulation. So you can buy fiberglass insulation in a batt form, or you can get it in a loose fill form. And then around this is either a dryer vent or an O2 vent for heat of some sort, or some sort of gas furnace or something. So, these problems here have to be addressed for sure. Very simple. We can cover this with some OSB, some blue board, and then we can add insulation on top of it. Go through here with some foam insulation to stop any drafts that's going to come through here. And then this is a big thing in my book. So here we've got an attic, and let me just go over here and draw you a little picture to kind of give you an idea of what this is. This happens quite often. When the wind, I'm sorry guys, if you can hear all these dogs barking, when the wind gets howling, then we get the dogs just every time, just drive me nuts. So here we have, let's say that this might be a bonus room above the house, or an attic space up here. And so, this space here probably gets, it can get to 180 degrees and sometimes. And so we put this R30 insulation through here, R38. And then the code says that because this is a wall, we can do R13 plus 2. Well, if this is going to get to 180 degrees, then we don't want to, what kind of insulation in here? So code says this, but really, if we're going to put, an R38 here, why not put an R38 here, or at least an R30, or even a 19, to stop this flow of heat moving into the attic space. And I'm sure you guys have probably been in some houses that have these little attic rooms, and you go up there in the summertime and you can have you can have a window air conditioner running full blast all the time, and it's still, you're hot. You can't get rid of this at all. So then the code says that we have to have a door in here. All attic spaces have to have a door that makes this accessible. And so we got to put a door here. So what do? They put these old crappy doors in here. This is an interior door that they've put in here. There's no weather stripping whatsoever around through here. And this is terrible. I mean, this is like fixing up a really nice room and then having a door that's going to allow heat to pass through it. How can we fix this? There's several things that you could possibly do. One of them is the simplest and probably the easiest way to do that is glue some blue board on here, or some ISO board onto the back of this. And that will give you some resistance on this door. Now, you could possibly find an insulated door, but it is going to be hard and few between to, because of the shape of it. Insulated doors, standard sizes are 6'8" tall, and they can go from 2 foot all the way up to 3 foot standardized. Okay, so we're talking every 2 inches. Well, probably no, that changes. So 2'4", 2'6", 2'8", and then 3'0". But most of them are going to be 6'8" tall, and some of these are, you may even have a door that's not even, it's going to be contoured to the ceiling. And I've seen this a lot, and you're just not going to get a door in this shape. It's an insulated door, not unless you pay a very pretty price for this. So something to think about, very easily glue you some blue board on here. So, again, not getting very complete insulation through here. This is an attic that is a bonus room over a garage. And so the garage typically is not insulated. And so they're not putting any insulation across through here where there's not going to be a room, but there is going to be a room over here. And sometimes this space they don't put these boards up here and air just flows through there. They put the insulation in. They don't put insulation over here, but they do put insulation over here in the floor. But by adding this board in here, it allows the stoppage of cold air from moving back and forth through there.
Eric, it's worthwhile to point out that although those insulations are working by trapping air, and the R value is based on the idea that it's completely enclosed. So the insulation material is only going to get its rated R value if it is enclosed on all 6 sides. When you've got a knee wall, if it doesn't have a exterior sheathing, it wouldn't matter if you put an R38 bat in a 2x6 cavity. If if it's all hanging out and air is able to move through that insulation, it's not going to get its rated R value.
Very good point. And that goes back to that envelope that I talked about. So to make all of this work, to have a perfect envelope, then we have to have all of these barriers working all the time, everywhere. All right. So and we have to do this for the conditioned space. We don't want any outside air coming in, and we don't want any unconditioned space that is going to be open to the conditioned space. So, the insulation is only a small part of this. And if all three are not working in compliance with the other, and like you say, you have gaps in there where that air can pass through there, then you're going to end up, it's not going to do its job. Absolutely. And that goes back to that one picture that I was showing of the bonus room over the garage here. If this board is not in place, then cold air is going to go through here. Another thing is, I want to show you this. So this is, so let's think about how we build this. We do our framing, and then sometimes we get the installation of plumbing devices that go in before the insulation is done. And this is not what we don't want to do. We don't want to end up having to stuff insulation behind the shower because the shower was installed before the insulation is done. So, when we think about the role of the carpenter has to start thinking ahead on all of these items. And kind of brings me up to another point here. And when we're going to look down on this corner here. And if we were to frame this conventionally, we're going to have a 2x here. We're going to have blocking here. And then we're going to have another 2x here. And I didn't get this drawn to scale. And then there's going to be another 2x onto here. So the framers come in, the carpenter comes in, and he puts all of this stuff up. And then he goes outside and he puts the sheathing on. And then we get these areas in here that are not insulated. There's no insulation there around those blocks. And we end up with a very cold corner. Let's think about a T. So a T on an exterior wall, and this is, historically framed in this fashion. And then we have a huge hole here that's not insulated because we've put the sheathing on. So we have to go back and rethink these areas, and it has to, the carpenter is going to have to think, can the insulator get in, or am I going to insulate it? All right. So if I was the carpenter and on this particular job, then I'm going to put some insulation. I'm going to go buy me a roll of insulation. I'm going to put some insulation in here, or I can start, framing my walls a little differently so that these can be framed up I knew I'd mess it up. These can be framed up in a different form so that I can get my insulation in here. So this is one way of doing a insulated corner. So we can go in through here and we can put our insulation in here after the fact. All right, after the fact that our OSB or sheathing is put up here. We can actually eliminate this even. This practice here is kind of, well, it's controversial because a lot of drywallers don't like using it. So basically what we're doing is we're putting this in, we're putting this in, and that's it. We don't put this one in here. And what happens is there's a little bracket that goes on here that the drywall is attached to this little bracket. In this form, then this is constant up and down the wall. And so that basically we can still get into these sides and get into our insulation. T's, again, are thought up of, they got to be thought a little bit ahead of time. And very simply, we go into in between the studs that's already there, and we put in blocking that goes between this. In other words, let me erase this other part over here. So we have our wall and our studs going through here, and basically what we want to do is just put some blocking in between these two joists, or studs rather, and then we can put the T-wall on here, and then we can still get in between and around this to insulate this. And for many, many years, we didn't do that. So looking down on this again, there's our stud wall, exterior stud wall, and here's our studs looking down. We put that blocking in here. So this blocking is this, and then we can put our first stud to our wall. This stud is this one here, and this blocking, of course, is these three here, so that we can still get in around that to do our insulating in between it. Another problem when we're talking about insulation is that little electrical box. So we're looking at the side of our stud wall. So we've got a double top plate, we've got a single sole plate, and then we've got that electrical box in here that's hung on the wall. If people are doing the bad insulation, a lot of times, I've seen this happen tons and tons and tons of times. So this is looking straight in on the wall. You got that box here. They'll take a piece of insulation and they'll cut this hole in it right there for that to go, and then they just shove it in there. That means there's nothing back here behind it. And then I see another guy who's going to take this piece here that, you know, it's this thick, all right, it's that thick, and he cut it out of this section right there, and he's going to take that whole thing and shove it behind there, which means that he's going to compress this in to about that big, and this went from an R13 to an R4 because he compressed it. If he'd have tore this out, and you know, remember that the fluff is the stuff, you know, if he'd tore it out and not compressed it, but just got rid of this, then yes, it's going to be less than an R13, but it ain't going to be a 4. It might be, you know, a 6, it might be an 8, but it's going to be better than if you were to shove it in there. Remember that compressed fiberglass insulation is a bad thing. It does not, it basically turns into a conductor rather than an insulator.
So what's the solution for that?
So, you know, the solution is ripping down the insulation and stuffing fluffed insulation in there rather than compressed insulation in there, or go back to spray foam and spray behind your boxes, or even, you know, buy a sheet of isoboard or expanded polystyrene and cut you a piece to go directly behind that, all of those pieces. Now, you think about how much trouble that is. Will they do it? That's the question. You know, in construction, we make our money by being productive. You know, if it takes us 3 hours to do an hour job, we weren't making $30 an hour, we was making $10 an hour. So construction is just one of those things that you have to think ahead, you have to plan ahead, and you have to act accordingly. And if that's not done and people find out about it, you're going to end up with a bad name and people don't want to use you. In the old days, you know, let's get a house built up, boom, 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 done. You know, did it have insulation? What's insulation? Who cares? Nowadays, you know, people are looking for better efficiency. They're looking for better use of the materials. And, you know, if they spend an extra $200 in insulation to do a better job, then they know in the long run, they're going to get their money back in an energy bill, a cheaper energy bill.
Question. Knowing what you just showed us, and the industry is aware of all this, obviously for a long time, why couldn't they invent like a block that is sold with all electrical outlets and has to be code that when you put it in, this block keeps the R factor behind the all outlets, ceiling, whatever. And it's just coded. It goes with the electrical piece so it doesn't screw everything up.
It took from it took from right after World War II to probably the 80s for them to get an insulated recessed light can. So who sets the standards on codes? Most of the time it's the insurance companies that do that. They're not thinking about energy efficient. They don't give a shit whether the homeowner's paying $300 a month for an energy bill or not. The only thing they care about is they don't want to have to pay money because somebody got hurt from a fire or got killed from a fire. Only in recent codes have we started doing stuff like this. And this goes back to one of the things that, you know, I bitch about all the time, and that's the blower door. All right, so, and I'll show you, I'll give you another example too. So the blower door is an option. It is not required in building houses, but a duct blaster is. So the duct blaster, it tests leaks in your ducts. All right, but you know, this is an energy company. HVAC is an energy company or an energy industry. So this became mandated that you have to do a duct blaster test on all houses. You still don't have to do a blower door test. A contractor can have the option of paying $800 to have a blower door test done in his house that he's built, or he can go and write out a checklist. So let's look at something else that kind of irks me. To be an electrician, to be a plumber, to be HVAC, you've got to have, and I think it's 2,000 hours. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. 2,000 hours in an understudy. And then you got to pass a test to be licensed. Okay. GC, general contractor. To have a limited license, you have to have a minimum of $17,000 in a bank or in liquidated assets. I shouldn't say in a bank, in liquidated assets. And you can take a class on how to pass the test. That's it. To be a general contractor who is going to govern these people here in the building of a house, you have to have $17,000 to play with. You can take a class on how to pass the test, and then pass the test, you become a general contractor. There is no requirements whatsoever to learn the industry, to know anything about it. I have had numerous bankers, doctors, and real estate agents come and take my classes because they went and got their GC and they didn't know what their subs were doing. They had no clue if they were doing a good job, bad job, whatever job. So, you know, that's my pet peeve right there. And so another thing, a unlicensed contractor can do anything under $30,000. Now, they have when I was in business, I was not licensed, never have been licensed, don't want to be licensed. When I was in business, I could build an entire house because I had different contracts. I had a contract for the foundation, I had a contract for the framing, I had a contract for the roofing, I had a contract for the windows and doors, I had a contract for the finishes, okay? The wordage has changed today that you cannot have successive contracts. So you could do the foundation, you can build a foundation and not have a license, but somebody else is going to have to come in and do the framing. You can come back and do the insulation, but then you can't do the finishes. So, you know, you can't do a successive thing through here. So if you're dealing with anything at $59,999.99, you don't have to have a license. All you got to do is just hire licensed electricians, plumbers, and HVAC people. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so let's real quickly, we're running out of time. Let's think of a wall here. We have our sheathing, we got some wood siding, we have a 2x4 wall here. We have drywall on the inside. We have an R13 insulation in between the cavities. So in this, we have a couple of things. Oh, matter of fact, got a good little thing here I showed you. I know this is going to sound stupid. Again, I've got some real weird things going on in my mind. I'm sitting here cooking the other day. I was cooking oatmeal for my wife, and I got to looking at the way butter works. And my wife she was looking at me like I'm an idiot. So I'm down there cooking this butter, and I've got my little infrared camera here, infrared thermometer on there, and I'm doing this thing with the butter, and she's like, "You have lost your freaking mind." So this is a point to prove how, you know, we talk about these air films. So in here we have an air film, and so we have an exterior air film and we have an interior air film, and these can be found on that R value chart. So what that means is here I've got some butter that I just pulled out of the refrigerator, and the refrigerator I think is about 40 degrees, I'm guessing somewhere in that neighborhood. And so the butter on the inside of it is 40 degrees. The water over here has already started boiling, so it's 212 degrees. But then here we've got a line that we drew here. And so this is probably not, this was boiling over here, but this is not boiling. And obviously from here to there, we have a variant from 40 degrees up to, let's say, we'll say 180 degrees at this point. All right, so we've got a variant of different degrees here from 40 degrees to 180. And then we have a variant from 180 to 212. This is that air film that I'm talking about going around your house. All right, so that, when you hear me talk about an air film, that's that partially melted butter there. Let's see, I thought I had a picture of my wife stirring it. So when she stirred it, then it just dissolved super quickly. I guess I don't. No. And the reason was we were taking away all of these extra little variants in here and mixing the 212 with the 40 degrees, and that butter lasted for about 2 seconds and it was gone. So when we're looking at this chart here, These air films are that melted butter is what I'm talking about. So we said that we had an exterior finish of wood. So let me go over here and find where my R value chart was. There it is. And I want to go down here to my construction materials, and I want to look up siding. Wood bevel siding is 0.80. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna put 0.80. Now we've got different sections here. So in this case, I've got a wall and I've got studs. I've got insulation in here and ooh, I got pink in there. Got insulation in here. And then we might have a gap in here. So when I'm talking about these little different sections here, I'm talking about going through this particular point, and this is the frame. This is the insulation, and this is the gap. All right, so I've got framing, insulation, gap. So that's a line drawn through here. So that exterior air film goes through all of these. The interior air film goes through all of these. The exterior finish goes through all of these. The sheathing is going to go through all of these. So let's see, sheathing. I'm going to use 1/2 inch plywood, which OSB is the same thing, 0.63, 0.63. All right, but let's see. Whoops, sorry, 0.63. And then I've got my wall cavity. So when I'm talking about my wall cavity here, then, you know, this is the wall cavity. What happens on the inside here is the wall cavity. So different things change. Number one, the framing changes. So in a 2x4 frame, I have 0.38. So I'm gonna put in here 0.38. But it's not going to go through the rest of them because that's just this line. Over here, I'm going to have that insulation of an R13. And then over here in my gaps, in this particular case, I got nothing, but what was it? I said 6 to 8. Let's say we got an R8 over here. Maybe we got a little bit of insulation. We just don't have all the insulation we need. And then we have our drywall here. Our drywall is 0.45. I just remember that. So this gives us a different R value for each one of these columns through here. We have a 7.11 through the frame. We have a 15.73 through the insulation because we're taking the R13 and we're adding all of this other to it. And then we have our gaps in here. And
Question.
yep.
Isn't it supposed to be 0.38? You got 4.38.
Okay, so this is the you're talking about the wall cavity, this piece of wood. So
Is that a dimension?
yeah, so
Oh, okay.
that dimension right there is 3.5 inches. All right, so wood has an R value that is 1.25 per inch. Okay, so by using that method right there, then we can say 1.25 times 3.5, and that's where we end up with that 4 point. They just rounded up to 4.38. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just.
Okay. The more wood we have, the higher the R value is going to be on that. Now, when we're looking at how much framing is going in a wall, let's say that we have, you know, we got a 100-foot wall here, and you know, we've got a double top plate and studs out through here and a single sole plate. We have a certain percentage of this area that is going to be wood. Generally, that runs between 15 and 17%, depending on whether it's 16 inches on center or 24 inches on center. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to say that we have 17% framing. Whoops, I hit the wrong button there. I'm going to have 17% framing. So the gaps is, you know, we have to kind of look in here. Well, how much gaps do we have? If we were using the spray foam, isonine, or maybe the wet cellulose, that number is going to be very, very small. But when we're talking about bad insulation, generally that runs about 3 to, well, it can go to 100% depending on how shitty they do a job, but it can, you know, generally 3 to 5%. I'm going to put in 3 here, 3%. Now, I've got 100% of the wall. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically taking these and weighting them, much like we, you know, do the weights in our grades. And so we end up with our heat loss coefficients here and all of these. So this is area divided by the R value. So this is 17% area divided by the R value, 80% divided by 15, 3% divided by 10, and we get these coefficients. Then we take this last number, we're going to add all of these up, and we're going to divide that by 100 to end up with our whole wall. This whole 100-foot wall is an average of 12.89. Now, did that meet code? No. All right, we're supposed to have R13.2. Well, we didn't put that blue board on the outside of it. So let's go back and change something and add blue board to this. So I'm just going to go up here and say that I have blue board right there, 1/2 inch blue board. And let's see what that is. 1/2 inch, well, I don't need to see. 1/2 inch blue board is 5 per inch. So that's going to be 2.5. Now, we added that blue board. The code said that it was +2, but we ended up adding +2.5. Now we have an R15. Did that pass code? Absolutely, yes it did. We have the R13 that they require. We have the R2 in here. What if we go with a smaller one? Let's just put 2 in there. If we put a 2 here and an R13 here, then something changed. I hit the wrong button there somewhere. Sheathing 2. Yeah, okay, I must have hit that sheathing button. Okay, so we got an R2 here. We got an R13 here, which is code. Do we have a 15? Yes, we do. All right, so you kind of see how that works. Our gaps and our framing are negative numbers, but our insulation is going to be a positive number. Obviously, we can't build a house totally out of insulation. Well, we could if we're using a SIP panel, but so in that case, there's that. Okay, so lastly, and then we got to get out of here. I got another class coming up. Let's think about the attic door. So we have an attic access ladder, one of those folding ladders that go in here that fold up. And this is a huge, huge problem that hasn't been addressed by a lot of folks. Attic access ladder. So this is what I'm talking about here, is these attic access ladders. So basically this piece of wood right there is probably like 1/8 of an inch, piece of plywood, 1/4 if it's really good. That one there is really good because it has that, well, it's got an 1/8 inch piece of plywood here, but then it's got a 1/2 inch piece of plywood on the back side of it to make it more rigid. Problem is, you know, again, it's like having that stopper pulled out of your bathtub. All that heat is going to go right up and out through this. So how do you fix that? You've already put, hopefully you've put insulation dams up here that are higher than these floor joists, and you've got insulation in here to tap all of this heat loss in here. But what if we, before we do that, we create a space with some blue board or ISO board? In my case, it's ISO board. So I've taken some ISO board and I've built me a dam real nice and high with this blue board all the way around it. And then I've taken some more blue board or ISO board, like say in my case. And what I've done is I've made a cap. So I have, this is 3-inch ISO board. So that's 3 times 7.2, which is 21.6. All right, 21.6. My insulation over here is an R38 because I had an old house that I renovated and I could not get that space. So I have an R38 through here, and then I've got an R21.6 here. Now, this is still lower, and I am still going to have some heat that's going to try to flow through here. I could go on here and either, put another layer of board on here and increase that, and that's fine. But this number is better than this number, because if you don't do anything, that's what you've got. You've got this little piece of plywood when it's closed. Oh, and I also put seals. I put weather seals here. So when it closes, at least it has some air sealing there as well. And that is, you can also, I think you can buy these insulated, but so you can buy, yeah, so there's pretty much what I'm talking about, an access door over top of it. You can buy these, but you can also just make them out of, I wouldn't make them out of a little thin plywood like this. Mine was made out of 3-inch stuff. And you can buy these blankets as well. These blankets, that's what they look like. You're not going to have a whole lot of heat resistance on the sides, but hopefully you've got your insulation coming off of your attic on either side of that. But this is the best way to do that. And scuttle holes are the same way. Whew. Any questions? Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. I will see you guys on Monday. Have a good one.
See ya.
See ya.
Take care.
Later.